welcome back to my channel. My name's Becca. Today I am talking about my mid-year wrap-up. This is different from the mid-year book freakout tag, which I've already done, and I will link that in the description box. That video is more just fun questions about my reading. Today I'm going to talk more about the stats and how I'm doing with my reading challenges. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm currently filming this in June, but for the first half of the year, so January through June. So by the end of June, I read 101 books, which is the most I've ever read in one year up to that point. So that's pretty awesome, pretty fantastic, very exciting. And I'm kind of glad that I've finished my Goodreads challenge by now, just because now I can focus on books that I've had on my TBR for so long instead of trying to think about like, oh, I need to read as much as possible because, you know, I'm now working a full-time job and I have less time on my hands. So it's a lot less panic and more now I can focus on things that I'd really like to be reading. And so let's talk about some of the stats. Specifically genres. This is the stat that I find most interesting and the only one that I'm talking about today, just because otherwise I don't really care that much. So when it comes to genres, my most read genre of course is romance, and my least read genre was horror. I tried to separate these all into one book goes into one category. So for a fantasy romance, I really tried to pay attention to how is this book marketed, and if it's marketed as a fantasy, it's going in fantasy even if there are romance aspects in it. For example, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I would call this a fantasy romance, but I think it falls more into the fantasy category rather than romance just because of the way that it's marketed. Therefore, it is in the fantasy category and not the romance category. So, with that being said, I read 34 romance novels this year and 26 fantasy novels, which I think is not that surprising if you keep in mind that a lot of the fantasy books that I read were also romance, and a lot of the romance I read were also fantasy. I would say if you wanted to look at fantasy romance as a whole, it is the genre that I am reading the most of, or the subgenre, I guess. My next most read genre is contemporary. I read 15 contemporary books. I do also want to say that I did not mark graphic novels as a genre, because to me graphic novels are not a genre, they are a format. So a lot of the graphic novels that I read, and I read quite a few this year, I separated them into their genres, such as, you know, contemporary and fantasy graphic novels, science fiction. Okay, so I read 15 contemporary novels. I read 12 nonfiction, and I included with this poetry. So I've read 12 nonfiction / poetry, which is kind of pretty impressive, I would say, for myself. And then 6 sci-fi, 4 classics, 3 mystery / thrillers, and then at this point I'd only read 1 horror novel. And those are the stats of my reading thus far this year. Well, at that point, at the end of June. I've actually read quite a few horror novels since then, so horror being my least read genre, and romance being my most read genre. Not surprised at all. So let's go ahead and talk about something fun. My favorite book so far this year. So I don't know why this year has been so weird. Probably because I'm reading less fantasy, I feel like. Maybe that's why I feel like I have a hard time picking out favorites this year. I feel like in previous years it's been very easy for me to be like, all-time favorite of this year. This year I kind of just like looked at my Goodreads and just went down the list and thought like, what books stick out to me as ones that I'm always going to remember and have really like good memories reading those books, or it's just a good book, you know? So let's say, do I want to pick an all-time favorite of the year so far? if I were to do that, it would be A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas, just because this is the book that I was looking forward to the most this year so far, and also just it was so entertaining and it just made me really happy to read it. It was very good in that way that it just made me happy. Other favorite books, let's see, how should I do that? One of these books is a reread, and of course that is Nevermore: The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I will probably reread this book every single year, and it will be on my favorites every single year. My favorite romances of the year, so my favorite traditionally published romance, I guess I would say Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. I really freaking loved this book. I think it was just so well done. The character development was so good, and the characterization of each character, they were just so, like, this is just a great job of character development in a romance novel. I just loved it so much. Other romances that I really enjoyed this year, A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Mila Vane. This is a fantasy romance. I categorized it as romance because that is where it is in my library. But I definitely say this is definitely heavier fantasy in a fantasy romance. But I really loved the world in this book. I felt like it was very well developed, and it was so interesting and compelling, and it was so much, what I hate about a lot of fantasy is that they kind of try to build these worlds as new worlds, different worlds, but then they still keep aspects of human worlds that don't need to be there. For example, treating women like dirt. I think this is very common in fantasy. If you're thinking about like medieval or like very historical fantasy, they always have the aspect of treating women like trash, because I feel like that's how women were treated, you know, in the real world, for the most part. And I don't understand why that needs to be brought into fantasy. Like, if you can believe in dragons in a fantasy novel, why can't you also believe that, you know, women are badass warriors, you know? You know? And that is the reason why I loved Mila Vane's books, because she is writing these really awesome fantasy worlds where women and men, they do everything. Women aren't the only ones who are taking care of the home, you know, men do that as well. Men aren't the only ones who are warriors, women are as well, and it's just like, it's so refreshing, and I just really loved it. And then I've got 3 more books that I want to talk about as my favorites of the year so far. One being my favorite YA book that I've read this year, and that's Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender. I really enjoyed this book, as like YA fiction has been becoming more and more annoying for me to read, and while, you know, this book had that annoying, like, teenager kind of drama, I still really enjoyed it just because I felt like it was very entertaining, it was educational, and it had a really adorable, happy ending that made me really happy. Felix Ever After, looking for his happy ending, he got it, and it made me happy as well. So just a fantastic book, really enjoyed it. I don't know if Kaysen Callender has other books, but I definitely will be checking them out, if they do. And then 2 other books. Favorite classic of the year, Emma by Jane Austen. I really enjoyed reading this book, and I loved the story. I loved Emma as a main character, and I loved the kind of community aspect that we get in this Jane Austen, where we don't really get that as much in Pride and Prejudice, at least. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was cute. I liked all of the characters, even though some of them were really annoying. I just felt like the characterization in this book was really well done. I really enjoyed the ending, and definitely very close to Pride and Prejudice on my favorite scale, like very, very close. And the last book I want to talk about is my favorite graphic novel of the year thus far, and that is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This was a phenomenal book. I enjoyed it so much. I loved the artwork, beautiful watercolor, and the story itself was just so interesting, and I love how it was told. It was such a short and sweet novel that you got so much out of, and I highly recommend it. I think it was fantastic. And let's talk about my reading challenges for the year. Number 1, Goodreads challenge, read 100 books. Done. Only one that I was anywhere close to completing, only one I completed, probably the only one that I will actually complete. So, at the beginning of the year, I set a few challenges for myself. I will link them all below if you're interested in watching those videos. One of them was to read 10 classics this year. As of today, July 11th, I've read one. Oh my god, it's so shameful. Honestly, I'm not surprised. Maybe I'll get to them through the end of the year, I don't know. All I really care about at this point is that I finish Anna Karenina. This is my number 1 goal for classics for the rest of the year. The rest of them, I would like to read them, but I just like, number 1 goal, if I complete this by the end of the year, I'll be happy. My other reading challenge, one of my other reading challenges was to read 21 books that I own. So it was my 21 TBR, reading my shelves. So out of those 21 books, how many did I read? 3. Yep, only 3 of those books. I'm not gonna say I'm disappointed in myself because, you know, at least I read 3 books that I own. I have my TBR shelf. Looking at it stares me down every day. I'll probably read, looking at it, 1. If I can read 3 more, if I can match that 3 and read 3 more, that'll be somewhat okay. And then my last reading challenge for the year was to read all of the Goodreads fiction award nominees and the winner. The winner was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and then all of the other nominees from the list. Maybe this will just be a goal overall. A lot of these books I'm actually very interested in reading. I've just been in like that romance kick where I've been reading so much romance, so maybe by the end of the year I'll have read a few more of these. So far I've read 2. One of them I've decided that I'm not going to read. Let's see, out of the other ones, I do own quite a few of them. I really just hope that I read as much of these as possible. One of them I'm super excited to read, The Death of Vivek Oji. Another one, Una Out of Order. One of my old coworkers, she had mentioned it in our last book club meeting that she had read it and she really enjoyed it, and so it just made me a little more excited to actually get to that one. I do really want to read The Midnight Library just because of the conflicting things I've heard about it, and I think that it'll be either really moving or just a little too much, so we'll see. Other books that I'm really excited to read on this list, I'd like to read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, just because I've heard a lot about it and I'm not sure what to think. I don't know. The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I did purchase that book, so I feel like I should read it. Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I know Noelle Gallagher really loves that book, so I'd really like to read that one as well. A lot of these books are just like, I think they'll be really good, so I'm interested to get to them eventually, and fingers crossed. And that is it for my reading challenges of the year. I haven't been all that successful, but I've also gone through a lot of things this year, you know, with starting a new job and some other personal things in my life. Things going on with my family. I feel like I've went through a lot of stress, you know, also going with stress of health, you know, I've been having a lot of pain in my back. So I feel like while I haven't really completed these challenges, I am still really proud of what I've accomplished. This year, I feel like I've been just enjoying a lot of my reading, and that's what's important. Just reading because it's what makes me happy. Okay, so that'll be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know. I'm really curious, what is your favorite book that you've read thus far? Or what book you really did not like? I haven't talked about books that I didn't really like this year. There haven't been that many. I mean, there have been some mediocre books. Like, if you want to talk about ratings, I think my average rating this year was probably a 3, which isn't a bad thing because a 3 is a book that I still like. So yeah, let me know what your favorite book was this year. Maybe any interesting stats that you have about your own reading life, or what things that have been new to your reading life. I'd really like to hear it. So thanks again for watching this video. I hope that you stick around for some more bookish content, and I'll see you in a new one soon. Bye!